Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. So it's important to remember that a brand is a lot more than a series of colors, fonts, and styles. A brand is way more than that. But when you get to the point where an aesthetic really matters in your business, let's say you have a brand that relies on your aesthetic, or maybe you just want to better understand your customer's interpretation of your brand and how it's being associated. That is where brand styling comes into play, and it truly becomes important when you can invest in it. So in today's episode, I'd love to welcome Tanya Smith. Tanya is a branding and visual communications expert. She's the founder of WorkStory Creative, and she's a certified personal branding strategist for Brand Builders Group. Over the last 20 years, she's worked with hundreds of internationally renowned brands, including Guess, HP, Microsoft, Gary John Bishop, and the Life Coach School. And she's developed and improved their brand assets. While pursuing a degree in visual communications from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, she won multiple awards for design and was chosen to do her internship at an advertising agency whose clients included Universal Studios, Disney, DreamWorks, and other entertainment mogul giants. So I'm really excited to welcome Tanya onto the show today. She's going to be sharing some brand styling tips for you as a small business owner, give you some tips on when to hire somebody, what to look for, little nuances between color theory and how to actually style your brand that are going to be super helpful for you and your business. Let's hear from Tanya. Hey, Tanya, welcome back to the show.
How's it going?
Going well, thanks. Could you just say hello to everyone listening and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Tanya Smith, and I'm a branding expert. I live in beautiful Spokane, Washington, and I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. So tell us more about what it is you do, when it comes to branding. Let's talk about what do you actually help people do?
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of my clients are rebranding. They've been in business for a while. Maybe they kind of DIY'd their logo and website. Some are launching as well, and they want to look really professional. So that's what I help them do. And we always start with a strategy. So we kind of dive into what are their goals and who's their target audience, how do they help them, all of that kind of thing. And then my branding philosophy is really centered around storytelling for, who the provider is and the client and how they help them. And then also making sure the visuals communicate all of that. So we're not just looking at words, but also what what your body language communicates in photos, colors, fonts, all of that kind of thing. Really focused on visual communications.
Perfect. How would you connect the storytelling and the brand identity through the various aesthetic cues like the colors, fonts, style, all of that? How do you translate that? Like, what are the things that come to mind that connect those things? Because that's something that is a really interesting connection when you realize how much intention goes into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's so many psychological meanings behind so many things in our society that most people don't even know about. Like, it's subconscious, right? Even if we don't speak the same language, we all understand, waving or smiling or crying. All of those things are just innate as humans. And so when we can understand how certain things make other people feel and what they will think when they see those things, we can really subconsciously influence people to take certain actions or think certain things about you. So, for example, I really love, especially for personal brands, I recommend people have photos of themselves in their advertising and marketing and branding, obviously. And so I really pay attention to facial expression, body language, what clothing you're wearing, the background of the photos, what is that communicating? Are you, in an urban environment? Is it kind of a boho chic? Like, are you at the lake? We want to communicate to your target audience and make them feel like, oh, this is what I want, or this is the type of person I want to work with. So photos is just one example. And then colors are really powerful in communicating to people. And then, people are like, what's the big deal with the font? But
Mhm.
fonts communicate things to us as well. We could look at one and be like, oh, that's a Western font from the 1800s, or this is from the modern, the postmodern era. And those are all communicating different things to us. So those are really important choices as well.
So, can you give us some examples of what these things are communicating? Like, what are the cues that you see where some of us might just scroll down a list of fonts and pick one for whatever reason? Like, we just pick one or we pick a
Mhm.
color. I mean, so full disclosure, my branding was because I was planning Canva one day and I was like, I like this color. This looks good. We'll just stick with this.
Right.
And then I did the same thing with a font and it was slightly random. But if you ask me, why do I have those things? I could not really tell you.
Mhm.
I could probably make something up, but to be honest, it was kind of a random decision. So I would love to know the the thought that goes into that, especially as your clients go through a rebrand, in what do these different colors tell you? Like, can you give us some example of some of the color theory or some of the theory behind the fonts?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, first, your logo, at least for your podcast, the Keep What You Earn, did you intentionally design that one, or is
Depends
that
what you
the
mean
one
by
you're talking about
intentional.
there?
I did that, but like kind of just playing around.
Okay. So, well, I would have thought you really intentionally picked green because that's related to money.
That's the only thing that was intentional was a teal well, my tealish green was always I heard green was money and blue was calm, so I said we're gonna do a
Mhm.
bluish green, and that was as far as it went, but I picked that color in 2019 for Financial, and I just used the same green.
Perfect. Well, you did a
Yeah.
good job on that. I do like that it's not necessarily a money green, like it's a little more modern and feminine. And then the font kind of looks like the font on money. So maybe you subconsciously picked that. I don't know.
Well, again, that was the intention. So, I guess I could say I intentionally did it, but I was like, "Keep what you earn." I guess I don't think of it as intentional because I don't sit there and, like, analyze
Mhm.
fonts. I saw the brim narrow font, and I was like, "That looks like money. I like that. It feels authoritative, and it feels official, and I like that." So, it was more of how I felt,
Yeah.
and I said, "That feels like the right font for it." But if you ask me, "Why did you pick that?" I'm like, "It kinda looks like money, and it's green." And for me, that doesn't feel very special, but I'm glad that you think that that's intentional. Like, I didn't realize that that was kinda part of the story.
Yeah. Well, that was a logical decision that you made based on that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was a good one. So, and a lot of people aren't thinking about that. They're just like, oh, here's a,
Mhm.
scripty
I
font
like
that
yellow.
looks
I
cool.
like this.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I think you did a good job. But I actually just presented two brands this week. So I could use an example of one. She started as a life coach, but she's moving more into helping coaches market their business with Facebook ads. And she didn't really have any intentional branding. It was just kind of like, same thing, like, this is pretty. And so when looking at the colors for her, well, her current colors are really muted, like kind of beiges and mauves and stuff.
Mhm.
But I was thinking, they're doing a lot of Facebook ads. That's their main focus. And we need a bright color that's really going to attract people. And her main target audience is women. So I wanted to choose something feminine. And I did a little research, and purple is a favorite color for women, and it's the least favorite color for men. So, and sometimes, what's the word? Repelling your
Mhm.
not target audience is a good idea. So,
Yeah.
and we ended up going with kind of a really bright purple and then just a black that's sophisticated. And then we added a teal, which gave it kind of a more modern feel. And she's kind of a casual person, but also stylish. So, those were just all things that I was thinking of when I was choosing the colors and the fonts. That's just kind of simple looking and clean. And we looked at the fashion industry for some inspiration, which she thought was interesting. She's like, I never would have thought about that. But her target audience is, a little bit older women. They have a disposable income. They're likely to have a designer handbag or something like that. So I like to look for inspiration outside of a certain industry sometimes to make something unique that doesn't look like everyone else in your space. So, in fact, the other client I worked with this week is an optometry office, and they're adding aesthetics and injectables and stuff into their services. So, their logo was an eye. And like every optometrist in our entire city has an eye
Yeah,
in
of
their
course.
logo. And like they were kind of married to their icon. They're like, well, what if we just kind of update the colors and the fonts? So I gave them that option, but then I also presented some others, and they decided to go in the totally opposite direction with something that is more fashion
I
related
love
to
that.
appeal to that audience that is into cosmetic procedures. So yeah, so that's a
That's a
tip for you. Like look outside of your industry for inspiration.
that's a really good point, actually, that you don't have to be so literal. Because
Hmm.
I think that people, they think it's like cute or clever or like, oh, who would have thought that the optometrist had an eye for the O or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, come on, we know. And we know what you do, but it's more about what do you want people to feel when they look at it? What do you want people
Mhm.
to associate with you, right? So,
Yeah.
and let's talk about that. Like, how do you unpack for them? Because I know this is something that people struggle with is articulating what they want because they know or they know
Yes.
their kind of brand identity deep down, but they've never had to explain it or never had
Right.
to answer the question, how do you want your customer to feel when they associate your brand? Like an optometrists understand too is like, well, I want them to feel like they can see. It's like, no, that's not the point.
Right.
The
Right.
point is, what do you want to associate with it? How do you get people to articulate that and to kind
Yes.
of start identifying what that is for them, for their brand?
Yeah. So I have this thing called a brainstorm. It's a 2-hour interview that we do. And I have a bunch of questions that are specifically made to facilitate that conversation. And a lot of them, like you said, they're like, I never thought of this before. Some of the questions that are just made to bring those things up. And it's usually pretty productive, diving deep into how your target audience would think. With the optometrist, again, they wanted to be high end. So we were looking at, what fonts and colors and photos would communicate that. And like we looked at the Lens Crafters website and it looks cheap.
Right.
And that's what they're going for, right? Like we're affordable eyeglass. And so they wouldn't want to show a brand image that looks super high end because that's not the customer they're trying to attract. So it's really apparent when you compare two brands like that.
Yeah, I think it's important to, like you said before, not just look at who's in your industry doing it for two reasons.
Hmm.
One is you don't know if you want the same brand as someone else in your industry, like go after the same type of
Hmm.
customer. And number two is you want to stand out. So the best thing to do
Yep.
to stand out is to not do what other people are doing and
Yep.
actually do that. And there's so many different subtle cues, right? Somebody, because you mentioned the purple and teal, I have to bring this up because it's hanging in my head. Somebody mentioned this online the other day. They said, remember when we were kids and every one of us had a starter jacket and it was always the Charlotte Hornets. And I was like, wait, I had that. And then they were like, you know why? I was like, no, why? And then they showed the Dixie cup. And then they showed like all these other images and they were like, you guys loved purple and teal back in
Huh.
the 90s. And I was like,
Yeah.
we did. And then and then I looked back at like all this stuff and I was like, damn, we really loved purple and teal. It brought me back to this like calming childhood thing
Hmm.
because I was like, every ice cream I ever had was in a cup with purple and teal squiggles on it. And it never,
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that.
so someone brought that up and I was like, I feel attacked. Like I feel seen. Like I feel so seen right now. But it goes down to that deepest level of like, who knew we associated certain colors with feelings or with
Hmm.
sentiments or with memories even? It's almost like a scent. You actually have
Yep.
the ability to give off an impression from the look of your business. And, let's talk about this. Well, it's not the most important thing to do. The first thing you do as a business, right? Like you don't need a logo to have a business. Let's talk
Hmm.
about the importance of nailing that, especially as you get clarity on what you want your brand to stand for. Can you kind of go through the process of when you recommend people invest the time to develop a brand style?
Yeah, I actually recommend people don't invest in an expensive designer when they're first starting, especially if they aren't super clear on what they offer and who they serve and how much money to charge.
Hmm.
So, go out and get your clients in whatever way you can do that. And then when you're a year in or you feel like you're making money, you've budgeted for marketing. Branding is a marketing activity. And so, if you don't have a budget for marketing, I recommend you set something aside at least, plan that into your yearly expenses. And then when you're ready, you're like, okay, I know who my target audience is pretty well. I know who's buying this and who is the ideal customer. Then it's a good time. And especially if you're getting calls from people who aren't the right fit, that can be a good indication that you are putting the wrong message out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one client that's an estate lawyer, and that was one of her main problems. She's like, I'm getting calls, like people are finding me on Google, but I tell them, it's going to cost about $3,000. And they're like, whoa, I can go on LegalZoom and do it for $400, And so her website was awful.
Yeah.
It looked cheap. It looked like kind of a LegalZoom thing. Like, oh, I can click here and get my estate plan or whatever.
Yeah.
And it just had so many things wrong with the website. And so we did a total rebrand. We made some videos explaining, why her service is high end, what she offers that's unique, and made it just communicate that with all of the things.
Right.
She stopped getting calls from cheap people, and people were still finding her on Google. She was booking the people that really wanted her service, and her business just really took off.
Love it.
From there. So that's a good indication. If you're not attracting the right clients, if you are ready, like the optometrist, their practice had been in business for like 70 years. He bought it from someone else, and they just were like 70 years old.
Wow.
We really just want to take it to the next level. And they were adding the other service, right? The aesthetics. And so they're kind of going in a different direction. That's another reason to rebrand and hire someone that really knows what they're doing.
Absolutely love it. Now, let's talk about, like you mentioned this before briefly, but like the background in your photos, and like, again, didn't even think of that, but also it does have an impact. Like if I see photos of someone and they are working, or they are at a coffee shop, or they are like, you want to associate the photos of what they're doing with building trust in what it is that you do. Right. So let's talk about like, what are some of the things, if you had to kind of, and I'm sure you have had to do this because this is what you do, but if you had to tell our listeners, so let's say a listener comes up to you and they say, hey, Tanya, I have a brand photo shoot this weekend. Mm-hmm. What are some of your best tips on what I should be doing beforehand, preparing for? What are some things I may not be thinking about? Like, all I've ever done is show up and get my picture taken. What's some of the stuff I can do to actually be intentional about how this goes?
Sure. So, well, first of all, if you hire a specific branding photographer, they should help you with that.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
If they're not doing that, they probably don't specialize in this, or just kind of new. But so I usually interview my clients before a photo shoot, and I have specific questions that I would ask you. And one of them would be, first of all, what do you do? Where do you do it? Who is your target audience? What do you want them to think when they see these pictures? Mm-hmm. What do you want them to do? And so then we just brainstorm, how could we communicate that in a photo? So let me think if I can think of a specific.
So let's use me. I'm an accountant, okay. Right? I'm an accountant. I want to work with, let's say I want to work with women business owners, mm-hmm. and I have so many different places at my disposal where I could take a photo shoot. Now here's the funny thing. I have done photo shoots, and I've done several of them. One of which was actually at a winery. Mm-hmm. I actually got to like stand there with a glass of wine. I got to like sit in the restaurant. I pulled up my laptop at one point. I was reading, right? So what do you think that sends as a message if like you think about those types of images? I was slightly intentional about it, but I would love to know, when you think about, okay, you're an accountant, why the hell are you taking pictures at a winery? Can we talk about like why that might have been a good idea, or what message that could send?
Sure. So I would think you as a personal brand are going to want to show things that the type of person you want to work with is going to be attracted to. So like, people who drink wine, people who go to restaurants, right? That kind of thing, and just want to see your personality. So if those are things you like to do, I think that's a good idea. Like, it's good to include some of the hobbies and activities if you're promoting a personal brand. And then also, I'm assuming you work with people who have money that they need to plan for, right? So a winery would be a higher end thing, a nice restaurant. So yeah, I think those are absolutely good choices. I was the first thing I would ask you is, do you meet with people in person, or is it all online.
So for
Um,
me, it's all online.
So in that case, I would show you working with people online. I wouldn't necessarily put you in a meeting with a client. But if you were meeting one-on-one with people, I would say it would be great to show you, in your office if you have one with people who look like your target audience. And then that's especially important for local service providers, I think, dentists, that kind of thing. I often see them showing stock photos on the homepage of their website. And I'm like, if someone recommended you, I'm going to go to your website. I'm going to check it out. And I want to see what your office looks like. I want to see the faces of the people I'm going to, see when I walk in there. I want to see what, is this a nice dentist office? I guess. Do you look like a freak or or a really nice guy,
Yeah.
or lady? So
Yeah. And if I'm going to go in there, I'm also going to be like, I want to look at the website because I'm also that weird person who's like, I want to go in and know who the hell the doctor is when I interact with
yeah,
them. So I want to know,
yeah.
like, this is our front desk staff, Mary. And I'm like,
Mhm.
great. Now I can walk in and be like, hi, Mary. And I know who that
Yeah,
person is because I
right.
like familiarity. So if I walk in and I'm like, y'all look nothing like the pictures on the website, who the hell are these people? It's
Mhm.
a whole different reset button on the brand.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And a lot of people will be like, well, I don't really want to be in pictures, or, is it really necessary? But the majority of people feel the same way as you.
Mhm.
We want to see what we're walking into, especially in this day and age where we can shop online before we even, choose a dentist.
Right.
It's totally different than it used to be.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, and it's just so important to have some type of association with your brand, right? And going back
mhm,
to like the location of a photo shoot or even what you're wearing or your background, right? I feel like there's also the sense of, is it super professional? Is it casual? Do you want people to see you in a
mm,
non-work setting doing something, or do you want them to see you as working all the time, like always in a suit,
yeah.
always? And there's no wrong answer, right? Because it's all about what you
Mhm.
want and what your goal is.
Yeah, it depends on what the message you're trying to send and the vibe of your brand, I guess. Like for you, if you had a brand that was a little more fun and like kind of funky, like it might be fun for you to be like throwing bills in the air or like swimming in a bed full of
I definitely have that
hundreds,
picture.
you know?
It's the
So
cover of the show.
yeah, awesome. Oh yeah, I guess it is. But a more like serious like CFO that works with like, I don't know, billion-dollar investment firms or something,
Right.
they're not gonna have those pictures on their website. So you have to ask yourself, who am I and who am I trying to attract?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so important. And what you want them to think about you, right?
mhm,
So let's talk about choosing somebody to work with you, like as a professional, right? So someone says, I'm
sure.
looking for a brand redesign. I want to hit a reboot. I want someone to work with me and start really creating a brand style intentionally. What are
Mhm.
some of your tips to find someone to work with or to start working with somebody?
Sure. Yeah. So, first of all, if you know someone that has a really awesome brand that you admire, you could ask them, like, who designed your brand?
Right.
And then contact them and meet with them, just see if you vibe with them, ask them what their process is. A lot of, I mean, if you've never worked with a designer before, you wouldn't really know what that should look like, but everyone does it a little differently. And so, like, my process is pretty unique. We do that 2-hour interview, and then I just create everything for you, and we meet and go over it. Like, a lot of other designers might create the first part and send it to you and see what you think, and then, some back and forth, which is actually how I used to work. And it takes a long time. It can get bottlenecked. So when I made that change, it's really made a difference. It's hands off for the business owner, and usually they love everything that I presented, and we were able to wrap it up pretty quickly. So I would ask them, how does it work if I'm going to work with you? And then look at their portfolio, obviously, examples of their work. You could even call some of the companies they worked with and ask for references for them. Most of my clients come to me as referrals. So I think that's the best way, just ask someone that you trust who
Yeah.
they recommend.
Even ask someone whose brand you particularly like, even if you don't know
Yeah,
them, you can always approach
right.
them and say, hey, I happen to
Yep.
really like your website. Who did it? This happens to me all the time. People have complimented us on our website, and I'm happy to share anything about it.
But it's really
Mhm.
cool because one thing with brand styling and with design is that your work is out there for the world to see, and you can actually, it's so much easier to get a feel for the product when you can actually
Mhm.
see it before you buy it.
Yeah. And a lot of designers will put a link to their website on the bottom of a website, like way down at the bottom.
Mm.
So that's a good tip too.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually do that with my clients with their permission. Can I just put site designed by
Hmm.
WorkStory Creative down there at the bottom? So that's a good way to find someone. And then as far as being ready, I mean, we talked a little bit about already about, some indications about whether or not you're ready, but and like prices can be all over the place too.
Yeah.
So, if you want a decent designer, I would budget like if you need logo and website, I would budget like $10,000 if you want a decent designer, but you could get it for $500
Yeah.
on Fiverr. So it just depends, and that's a consideration too.
Hmm.
What's your what's your budget? Is it worth investing in right now?
Yep.
And I would focus more on finding a designer you really like and then save up
Yeah.
for them, if you can, because it's going to be worth every penny. If it's done right, you have to do it again.
Right. This is very true. And rebranding is a huge pain in the butt, you guys.
Mhm.
Rebranding is an overhaul. It is tough. I I slightly did it. I didn't do like a full-blown rebrand, but I got a feel for when I changed my logo. Just changing my logo, I was
Mhm.
like, the headache of figuring out where all the Easter eggs are hidden,
Yeah,
where I've
right.
ever put my logo in the last 2
Yep.
years. Oh goodness. Yeah, I say invest in it and leave it where it is as long as you can. And the other thing
Yep.
was having some type of milestone in mind. Like I said, when I said I'm gonna do the whole website over and I'm gonna do the rebrand and the brand colors and get people to work with me once I have made X dollars in revenue or once I've sold X number of something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't
That's a
just for the
good.
financial purpose, but it was for the proof that I had a viable
Mhm.
offer and that I
Yep.
had a business. Because I said,
Yep.
I'm not going to invest in this until the business is on its feet and I
Mhm.
can prove that this is a viable thing. So I would
Yeah, I
add that to
definitely
the mix too. You have to make sure you have a really proven offer and you're super clear about
Mhm.
who you serve.
Yep. Yeah, because that's a mistake I'll see people make, especially like I work with a lot of women who like their career is coming to an end or their kids are leaving the house and they want to launch something and they have money
Yeah.
to spend. So they're like, I need a logo first and a website before I can do anything, which I'm happy to help them with, but it is more effective if they are really clear on what they offer and like you said, have proof that people will buy it. So that's a good idea to wait until then.
Yeah. And even though like it's still an expense, it's still like it's a good investment. I just think that, there are plenty of places where you could put that money to get customers and to get cash
Mhm.
flowing in because a brand alone doesn't make you money.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, it will make it easier to do your marketing and that kind of stuff. And one thing I just thought of too is your brand starts with your name,
Yeah.
right? That having the right name, I do help with naming sometimes if people don't know,
Okay.
or they're rebranding and they're like, should I use my name? Or they were using their name, right? Like Tanya Smith Photography, and they're like, well, I want to build a photography studio that is a franchise. Like, should I change the name to something else? Or that's something to consider when you start too, right? Like, are you going
Absolutely.
to eventually sell it? Do you want it to expand beyond just you? Or are you more of like an author and speaker and it's all about you?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, it really depends. It's also, I mean, I have a pretty strong opinion on this that I would never use my name in a business name. And I encourage people not to for reasons I explained in a different episode. And there's nothing like official tax related or anything related to it. It's just that you never know what your plans are going to be in the future.
Yep.
And I don't
Mhm.
want someone driving around in a car with my name on the license plate because I don't know what kind
Right.
of driver they are. So I just want to make sure that my name is under my control 100% of the time.
Right.
So
Yep.
I love the idea. I also love the idea of not having to pick up the phone and people know I'm the owner.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
people call me and they're like, "Hi, can I speak to the owner?" She's dead. She's not here.
Right.
No, I will say, "I'm sorry, who are you looking for?" And they're like, "The owner." Like, "Do you know who that is?" No. Okay, great.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
but if I answer Shannon Weinstein and they're like, "It's the Shannon Weinstein Company," they're going to be like, oh,
Oh,
hi. Like, you're the one with the money. You're the one with the
right.
decision making. You can't get away from me. I don't want that type of access. So
Mhm.
I think having a brand and having a name, like you said, that conveys what it is you do, it's such an opportunity to get creative and to associate different words with your brand other than just your name.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
unfortunately, like, sorry guys, no one knows who the hell you are until
Mhm.
they know who the hell you are. But that's really
Right.
the branding part of it.
Yep. Yeah, I did the same thing. I have a separate name for my business, but my personal brand is definitely really important to my marketing strategy. Like people know, they know me,
Yeah,
and they're referring people to me mostly because, well, that's the stage my business is in, I guess, just
exactly.
doing one-on-one services. But as I'm growing into more digital products and stuff like that, I definitely want it to grow beyond just me. So that's an important consideration.
Let's talk about that for a second. Personal brand versus a more professional or business brand. What are your recommendations for people? Like when you mentioned personal brand versus your company's brand, number one, distinguish those for us because I think people may
Mhm.
not understand the difference. And number two is, do you advocate having both?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, a personal brand could be the name of your business, right? Like with the coaches, a lot, I see that. It's just them. There's no reason why they shouldn't do that, depending on their goals. But you could also, like a corporate name, like you said, like this is a company, you could have 20 CFOs in your company. So you don't necessarily want to call it yourself. But you, as a person, have a personal brand as a podcast host and a teacher for courses and whatever else you want to do with that. So you've got both. And even if you don't own a business, you could have a personal brand, Maybe you work in a corporation, you're a, I don't know, tech genius or something, and you want to be able to have that influence and maybe become sought after for whatever reason or share your knowledge. So you could have both as a company and separate, or it could be the name of the company too.
Okay. So like, for example, right, I've got Keep What You Earn is its like
Hmm.
own brand. And then there's
Right.
Shannon. And
Hmm.
although those are probably not distinguishable to most people because they associate keep What You Earn with me, I do consider them to be different because Keep What You Earn's brand is around education and empowerment and all of that.
Hmm.
And while Shannon stands for the same thing, they're not always the exact same thing. Like there's going to
Yeah.
be Keep What You Earn content. And then maybe one day Shannon decides she wants to talk about something else. She wants to talk about marketing
Hmm. Yep.
and Keep What You Earn will still live. So like it
Hmm.
doesn't depend on Shannon's personal brand. It does relate to it. Is that kind of in
Yeah.
line with what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. 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 I totally agree with that. So, and again, that just comes down to your goals and the strategy behind what you're trying to do.
Totally. Any other advice or tips for our audience, Tanya, on building a brand style and a brand aesthetic?
Yeah. So I guess we didn't really talk about the person who is just starting out. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, do
Let's
I
talk about that.
have nothing? So, you could go to Etsy, pick a logo. I see this a lot. And I'm like, why did you pick this logo? Well, I like bees. Or I'm like, does it have anything to do with your business?
Yeah.
So I actually like this is something I've thought a lot about because I'm like, I want to help more people, but I'm just me. I can't, do it for everyone. So I recently created a quiz and it's the Discover Your Brand Style quiz. And it just takes like 60 seconds. It's a few questions and it actually is really effective. Everyone who's taken it are like, that sounds spot on, just like, what my brand should be. And so that just kind of distilled it down to something really easy. And then from there, I have what's called a brand your biz kit. And I walk you through, like, you have that style. And then I walk you through how to choose fonts and colors and maybe an icon if you decide to use one that will communicate that style. And so it's not as customized, obviously, as hiring a designer, but I feel like it's more intentional than just picking a random logo
Agreed.
that you think you like or colors. Colors are the hardest thing. Even for me as a designer, picking the right color, it's so hard. People just like, I don't know what color, even if you want green, like there's 5,000 shades of green. How do you
Exactly.
know which one is going to communicate the right thing?
I can't even pick a damn nail color at the salon. You're gonna make me pick this, and I'm only committed to that for 2 weeks. And now I have to pick something that I've committed to for like years. It made me so
Yeah.
nervous. I was like, close my eyes and pick a hex code on Canva and go, that's the color. We're just gonna go with it.
Right.
Yeah. It's just so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Right. So this I'm hoping is going to make it a little easier for people
Yeah.
to create something quickly and that's affordable. So, because I want to help people launch, right? Like part of my mission, I was just reading your post the other day about your mission to help women
Mhm.
be able to work without that grind of like no flexibility. That's part of my mission too. I want women to be able to be empowered to make money without having to sacrifice the home life that they want or their dreams. And so, yeah, I'm hoping this will just help more people.
I love it. Where can folks find out more about what it is you do and how you can help them?
Yeah, so workstorycreative.com is my website. And there's a link to that quiz in there and the Brand Your Biz Kit. And I have other stuff I offer on there too. But
Absolutely.
yeah, you can find me there.
We'll link all that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Tanya, for jumping on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you find yourself surprised by how much you make and how little you actually keep, then your problem probably isn't your profit. It's your cash flow. Cash flow problems are the number one reason small businesses fail because they run out of gas in the tank. And that's why I released a mini course called Endless Cash that helps you quickly forecast your own cash flow using the same template that we use with our clients. If the pressure of launches and big investments stress you out, then grab a copy of Endless Cash and start getting ahead of those road bumps right now. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.